They stood in my driveway. 3 board members, a security guard, and half my neighbors pretending not to stare. The HOA president stretched out her hand. Her smile looked polite, but her eyes were sharp like knives. "Give us the key. We need to see inside your garage." I held that key in my palm, frozen, because what I kept behind that door was the one thing that could change everything. And when the door finally opened, no one was ready for what they saw. Welcome back to HOA Secrets, where the quiet streets of suburbia hide the loudest stories. I'm Daniel. I live in a small cul-de-sac in Arizona. I work in IT, but my real full-time job is surviving my neighborhood's HOA. And this story starts with one letter on my door, a letter that told me to hand over my garage key, a letter that dragged me into a battle I never asked for. The letter was taped to my door early in the morning, bright white paper with big bold words across the top. HOA inspection notice. Immediate garage access required. At first I thought it was a joke, maybe some flyer for lawn service, or one of those annoying political ads. But then I saw the signature at the bottom, the president of our HOA board, her name written like she was signing the Declaration of Independence. It told me, plain and simple, that I had to hand over my garage key. No explanation, no reason, no details, just a demand. I read it twice, 3 times, my hands shaking a little, because who in the world thinks they can walk into someone's garage without permission, without a warrant, without even knocking? I live in a quiet neighborhood in Arizona, a cul-de-sac where everyone waves in the morning, where people cut their lawns like they're competing for a medal. Every driveway lined with the same mailbox, the same trash can, and the same shutters painted in approved colors. It was perfect. Or at least, it looked perfect. The truth was different. The truth was behind all those smiles and neatly trimmed hedges. The HOA ruled like a shadow government, and the president, well, she was like a queen without a crown. She fined my neighbor once for having wind chimes. She forced another family to repaint their door because the shade of blue was too cheerful. If you didn't follow her rules, she made sure you paid for it. And now, it was my turn. I stared at that letter, wondering if maybe they had me confused with someone else, unauthorized storage. That's what the paper said in tiny print, as if I was hiding a warehouse inside my garage, as if my little suburban house was some kind of secret factory. I crumpled the letter in my hand and laughed. But it wasn't a happy laugh. It was one of those laughs you make when you know something bad is coming. Later that day, I stepped outside and saw her, the president, standing at the end of my driveway, talking to 2 other board members, whispering like they were plotting a heist. She saw me and smiled. But her eyes never smiled. She called out, "Did you get our notice?" I nodded slowly. She tilted her head, waiting. And when I didn't say anything, she said the words that made my stomach twist. "You'll hand over your garage key by the end of the week, or we'll take further action." I wanted to ask her what kind of action. I wanted to tell her she was crazy, but I didn't. Not yet. Because here's the thing. The garage wasn't empty. The garage wasn't harmless. Inside were 2 old motorcycles my grandfather left me. They weren't running. Not yet. But they were my project. And according to the HOA rules, motorized vehicles not in operable condition couldn't be stored in plain sight. So yeah, I knew exactly why she wanted the key. She wanted to catch me breaking her rule. She wanted to find me, embarrass me, make an example out of me in front of the whole neighborhood. I looked back at her and said quietly, "You're not getting my key." The smile fell off her face. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping low. "Then we'll see what happens next." And she walked away, like a villain at the end of a movie scene, leaving the hero to wonder how bad the sequel was going to get for the next few nights. I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me jump. A car door closing, footsteps on the sidewalk, even the creak of my garage door in the wind. I kept checking the locks, making sure the motorcycles were covered, praying no one would break in, because it wasn't just about the bikes. It was about principle. It was about the idea that someone thought they had the right to invade my space, my home, my history. The week passed quickly. too quickly. And then, Friday afternoon, it happened. I heard voices outside. I opened the blinds and saw them. 3 board members, the president in the lead. A man in a cheap security uniform behind her. They were standing in my driveway, holding papers, pointing at my garage door. My stomach dropped. They weren't asking anymore. They were here to force it. I walked outside slowly, my heart pounding like drums. The neighbors peeked from their windows. Some even stepped onto their lawns pretending to water plants. Everyone wanted to see the showdown. The president held out her hand again. "Give us the key," she said. Her voice was calm, but sharp. The board members flanked her like bodyguards, nodding along. I looked at the key in my hand. I could feel the metal pressing against my palm. I could feel every eye on me, and I thought to myself, if I opened that garage, everything would change. I took a deep breath. I walked toward the garage door, and with every step, the crowd got quieter, like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. My hand touched the lock. The key slid in. The president leaned forward, her smile creeping back, but she had no idea what was coming next, and the truth is, neither did I. So tell me, if you were standing in my place, with the HOA demanding your garage key, would you hand it over, or would you fight back? The key was already inside the lock. All I had to do was turn it. One small twist, and the door would rise. The HOA president leaned closer. Her perfume was sharp, like cheap roses sprayed too many times. She wanted this moment. She wanted to see me obey, to hand her the little victory she could brag about at the next board meeting. I didn't move. I just held the key there, frozen. And the silence grew heavier. The neighbors whispered. One man muttered, "Just open it." Another laughed quietly, waiting for a show. That's the thing about suburbia. People love drama, as long as it's not their own. Finally, I stepped back, pulled the key out, and said, "You don't get to walk into my garage just because you feel like it." Her smile cracked, her eyes narrowed, and she held up a stack of papers. "This is an official order," she snapped. "Failure to comply will result in fines, suspension of privileges, and potential legal action." I took the papers from her hand. The pages felt thin, almost flimsy, and as I looked closer, I saw what I had suspected. No letterhead, no legal seal, no attorney name at the bottom, just words typed in bold, like some kid's school project. It wasn't official, it wasn't legal, it was a threat printed on copy paper. I lifted my head slowly and said, "This isn't worth the ink it's printed on." The president's face turned red. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You think you're clever, but everyone here will see the truth. You're hiding something." The crowd stirred again. That was her weapon. Not the paper, not the rules, but gossip. If she couldn't find me, she'd shame me. And in a neighborhood like mine, shame could ruin you faster than money. I turned away from her and walked back inside, but even with the door shut, I could still hear her voice outside, talking to neighbors, whispering her story, planting her seed of doubt. The next day, the letters started. Small envelopes tucked under my doormat. Violation notice. Possible unauthorized storage. Reminder, garage access still required. Final warning, cooperation needed. Each one stacked higher on my kitchen table, each one sounding more desperate. And then came the email. A message sent at 3:14 in the morning from the HOA board account. Subject line, immediate attention required. The body of the email was just one sentence. "We will get into your garage one way or another." I sat there staring at the screen, my hands cold, my chest tight. Because this wasn't just pettiness anymore, this was obsession. I tried to ignore it, but the HOA doesn't like being ignored. They doubled my monthly fee. They sent me a $250 fine for improper trash bin placement, even though the cans were perfectly aligned. They even claimed my mailbox was 1 inch too tall. It was war, silent, but constant. Neighbors started avoiding me. The couple across the street stopped waving. The kids who rode bikes down the block swerved around my driveway like it was cursed. I could feel the neighborhood turning against me. One family at a time, one evening. I was working in the garage. The motorcycles were half covered. Tools spread across the floor, and I heard it. A faint click at the garage door handle. Someone was trying to open it. I froze, holding my breath. The door rattled slightly, then stopped. By the time I ran outside, no one was there, just the cool night, dead air, and the faint sound of footsteps fading down the street. That's when I knew. They weren't going to wait for permission anymore. They were going to find a way in, so I decided to get ready. I installed a small camera inside the garage. Pointing at the door, I reinforced the lock with a steel latch, and I waited. The next weekend. It happened. I was at home watching TV when my phone buzzed with a notification. Motion detected. Garage camera. My heart jumped into my throat. I opened the app and saw it. The HOA president herself. Dressed in plain clothes. Sunglasses at night. Trying to jimmy open the side door of my garage with a thin piece of metal. She wasn't alone. Another board member stood beside her, watching nervously, and the so-called security guard kept lookout by the sidewalk. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The same people who sent me letters about community values were breaking into my property like burglars. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police. My voice was shaking as I explained, and for once, they came quickly. The flash of red and blue lights lit up the whole cul-de-sac. The president jumped back from the door. Caught red-handed, the neighbors poured out of their houses. Drawn to the commotion like moths to a flame, the officer asked me to step forward. "What's going on here?" he said. The president opened her mouth first. "This man is hiding dangerous materials in his garage. We're protecting the neighborhood." The officer turned to me, waiting. I held up my phone, showing the live feed of her breaking into my garage. Her face dropped. The neighbors gasped, and for the first time, the power shifted. The officer told her to stand back. He looked at me and asked, "Do you want to open the garage voluntarily so we can clear this up?" I hesitated, because deep down, I knew what was inside wasn't dangerous, but that was enough for the HOA to twist into another accusation. Still, if I refused now, it would look worse. So I walked over slowly, key in hand again. The crowd gathered tighter. The president's eyes burned with anger. The lock turned. The door creaked. And slowly, the garage lifted. The motorcycles gleamed under the dim light, covered partly by sheets, but shining enough to catch attention. Next to them, boxes neatly stacked, old tools, a workbench. That was it. No explosives, no drugs, no monsters hiding in the shadows. Just a man's garage, messy but honest. The neighbors looked confused. One whispered, "That's it?" Another laughed nervously. The president's mouth opened and closed, searching for words. But there were none. Her big dramatic reveal had turned into her public embarrassment. The officer shook his head and said, "Ma'am, this isn't a crime scene. It's just a garage." He turned to me and nodded. "You're free to go about your day." The crowd slowly dispersed, whispers trailing off into the night. The president stormed away, her shoes clicking hard against the pavement. But I knew this wasn't over. Not for her, not for me. Because when people like that lose power in public, they don't forgive, they don't forget, they get even. And as I closed the garage door that night, I couldn't stop thinking. If this was how far she was willing to go, what would she try next? After that night, things changed in the neighborhood. But not in the way I hoped. The board president didn't back down. She didn't apologize. She didn't even hide. Instead, she doubled down. The very next morning, I woke up to a bright yellow paper stuck to my front door. Violation notice. Excessive noise from garage activities. Noise? I hadn't even turned on a wrench that day. I tossed it on the pile with the others, but more kept coming, every day. Another letter. Lawn, not uniform with community standards. Driveway stains must be removed immediately. Unauthorized vehicle storage still under investigation. They were throwing everything at me. Not because I was guilty, but because I had embarrassed her in front of the entire block and in neighborhoods like mine. Humiliation is blood in the water. Neighbors started avoiding eye contact. Some waved less. Some didn't wave at all. One family even crossed the street when walking their dog just to avoid my yard. It was like I had become a ghost in my own street. And the president, she was the one whispering behind it all. I caught her once, standing by the mailbox cluster with another homeowner. Her hands moved like she was telling a story, her face twisting in fake concern. When she saw me, she smiled. That same smile without warmth, without honesty. The kind of smile that hides knives. I tried to ignore it. I told myself to lay low, let it pass. But then, the letters turned into fines. One envelope said I owed $500 for garage misuse. Another added $250 for landscaping neglect. Even though my grass looked just like everyone else's, they stacked higher and higher, until the total was more than $2,000. I didn't have that kind of money to throw away. Not for lies, not for her pride. So I went to the next HOA meeting. It was held in the community center, rows of folding chairs, a cheap podium at the front, a stale smell of coffee and old carpet in the air. The board sat in a line, 5 of them, with the president right in the middle like a queen on her throne. When I walked in, the chatter got quiet. I could feel the eyes. I could feel the judgment. The president cleared her throat and said, "Ah, yes, Mr. Daniels, here to discuss your numerous violations." I took a seat and said calmly, "I'm here to discuss your harassment." Gasps from the crowd, neighbors shifting in their seats. The board members looked at her, waiting for a signal. Her smile never moved, but her eyes flashed like fire. She leaned into the microphone and said, "Aid. We only enforce the rules. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear." The crowd nodded, murmuring in agreement. She had them wrapped around her finger. So I pulled out my phone, I pressed play, and the sound of her breaking into my garage filled the room, the metal scratching, the door rattling, her voice whispering orders to the others. The recording echoed through the hall. People turned to look at her, and for a moment, just a small moment, the mask slipped. Her face froze, pale and tight. She reached out and slammed the table. "This is out of context," she shouted. "This is being twisted." But the damage was done. The whispers spread like wildfire. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Even some neighbors frowned. I thought I had won that night. I thought the truth had finally pierced her armor, but I underestimated her. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived in my mailbox. It wasn't from the HOA, it was from a law firm. Cease and desist. Defamation and harassment of HOA board. She had turned the tables. She was suing me, claiming I had slandered her reputation with doctored audio. She was trying to bury me under legal threats. I couldn't believe it. One minute I was defending my garage. The next, I was defending myself in court. I met with a lawyer downtown, a man with gray hair and tired eyes. He looked at the letter and sighed. "This isn't about winning. It's about draining you. She wants to scare you into submission." I asked him what I should do. He leaned back and said, "You can fight, but it will cost you. Or you can comply and let her win." Neither option felt like victory that night. I sat in my garage, staring at the motorcycles. The steel frames gleamed under the single bulb. They weren't just bikes. They were memories. My grandfather's hands had turned those bolts before mine. To me, they weren't unauthorized storage. They were family. And I realized something. If she wanted a fight, I'd give her one, but not the way she expected. I pulled out the HOA rulebook. That thick binder they gave every homeowner. The one nobody actually reads. I read every page, every section, every ridiculous line about mailbox height, lawn color, trash bin hours. And slowly, I smiled. Because the board president wasn't perfect either. Her roses, planted too close to the sidewalk. Her fence, painted a shade not on the approved palette. Her pool, the filter system extended 2 inches past the setback limit. She had broken more rules than anyone, and all I had to do was follow them to the letter. The next week, I filed 3 formal complaints against her, each one backed with photos, measurements, page numbers from the rulebook. She laughed when she got them, but that laugh didn't last, because when the other board members saw the evidence, they couldn't ignore it. They had to log it. They had to fine her, the queen of the HOA, fined under her own rules. The irony was delicious, but she didn't take it quietly. Oh no. She showed up at my house the next evening, banging on my door, her face red, her voice shaking. "You think you're clever. You think this is over. But I will destroy you." Neighbors gathered again. Watching from across the street, I stood calmly in the doorway and said, "I'm just following the rules. Isn't that what you told me?" Her jaw clenched, her fists tightened, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, not fear of me, but fear of losing her throne. That night I realized, this wasn't just about garages or bikes or fences. This was war, and only one of us was going to walk away with power. The complaints I filed against the president spread through the neighborhood faster than wildfire, and for the first time, people started whispering about her instead of me. The board tried to keep it quiet. They held their meetings behind closed doors. They avoided eye contact when I walked by, but the cracks were showing. Be saw it, 'cause everyone knew the woman who fined us for the tiniest mistakes was now guilty of breaking her own sacred rules, the roses that climbed too far onto the sidewalk, the fence painted in a color not on the approved palette, the pool filter jutting out just past the setback line. They were all small things, but in HOA world, small things mean power. And suddenly, she was no longer untouchable. At first, she tried to laugh it off. She told people it was all a misunderstanding, that I was twisting the rules, that I was obsessed. But I had the photos. I had the pages marked in the HOA rulebook. I had proof. And proof is poison when you've built your empire on control. The fines against her stacked up, one after another, not huge amounts, but enough to sting, and the whispers turned into questions. Why should she be president if she can't even follow the rules herself? I thought I was winning. I thought maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was finally ending. But I underestimated her again, because when some people feel the power slipping through their fingers, they don't let go. They claw. The retaliation started small, a broken egg on my driveway, my mailbox door left hanging open every morning, trash scattered across my lawn even when I hadn't put the bins out. At first I thought it was kids, but then I saw her, late one night, standing at the edge of my yard, a flashlight in her hand, pointing at my grass, whispering into her phone like she was logging evidence. She wasn't just petty anymore. She was obsessed. The next week, the fines came back, this time for things I knew weren't real. Unapproved satellite dish. I didn't even own one. Improper driveway slope. How could I change the slope of concrete poured 20 years ago? It was laughable, but the board stamped them anyway because she still had influence. Because fear still worked, I decided to fight back harder. I went to the county office downtown. I requested copies of every permit filed for her house, and what I found made me grin. Her back patio extension, Bill A, without a proper permit. Her shed, constructed 2 feet beyond the property line. The queen of the HOA had been living in a glass castle, and I was holding the first stone. I filed another complaint, attached the county records, and this time, the board couldn't protect her. The fines were massive, thousands of dollars, bigger than anything they had ever thrown at me. She lost it. She showed up at my driveway screaming, her voice echoing across the cul-de-sac. You think you can ruin me? I built this neighborhood. I made the rules. Neighbors peeked through blinds, some even filmed on their phones, and for the first time, she looked small, not powerful, not untouchable, just a woman screaming into the night. I thought maybe this was the end, but then the real twist came. One afternoon, I came home from work and saw an envelope taped to my door. Not the usual HOA paper. This one was from the City Code Enforcement Office. It said a formal complaint had been filed against me for operating a commercial repair business out of my garage. My heart sank. I knew exactly who filed it, and I knew exactly why. The city gave me 30 days to prove my innocence or face heavy fines, even the possibility of losing my occupancy permit. She had gone beyond the HOA now. She had dragged the city into it, and suddenly, the war was bigger than I ever imagined. I sat in the garage that night, staring at the motorcycles, the projects that had started this whole mess. They weren't a business. They weren't illegal. They were just mine. But now, they were the weapon she was using to destroy me. I felt trapped, like every move I made. She had already planned the counter, and I wondered, how far was she willing to go? The next HOA meeting gave me the answer. The room was packed, more people than I had ever seen before. Whispers filled the air, tension heavy like a storm cloud. The president Ogden last, her smile wider than ever, her eyes sparkling with something almost cruel. She banged the gavel and said, Tonight we discuss the removal of a homeowner for failure to comply with community standards. She looked right at me when she said it. The crowd gasped. Neighbors turned to each other. Nobody had ever been removed before. But she was trying to make me the first. I stood up slowly. My heart was racing. My hands were shaking. But my voice was steady. I pulled out the stack of letters. Every fake violation. Every forged order. Every photo I had of her breaking the rules, and I dropped them on the table in front of the board. The sound echoed through the room like thunder. The board members flipped through the pages, their faces pale, because the truth was undeniable now. They couldn't cover for her anymore, not with the whole neighborhood watching. The room erupted into shouts. Some defended her, some demanded her resignation. Chaos filled the hall, and in the middle of it all, she stood silently, her smile gone, her face pale, her hands trembling ever so slightly. For the first time, she looked defeated. But here's the thing. When someone like her loses power in public, they don't just vanish. They plot, they wait, they strike when you least expect it. And as I walked home that night, past the glowing streetlights and quiet houses, I couldn't shake the thought. If this was what she did when she still had some control, what would she do, now that she had nothing left to lose? After that meeting, I thought the storm had passed. The board looked shaken. The neighbors were whispering against her, and the evidence I dropped on the table was too heavy to ignore. But I was wrong. The storm wasn't over. It was only getting started, because when someone loses their crown, they don't disappear. They sharpen their claws. The president didn't resign. She didn't apologize. She didn't even slow down. Instead, she got meaner. The next week, I found nails scattered across my driveway. Not one or two, a whole handful, placed carefully where my tires would roll. I patched 2 flats before I realized what was happening. And every time I stepped outside, I swore I could feel eyes watching me from behind curtains. Then came the letters again. This time, not from the HOA, from anonymous sources, typed notes with no return address. Move out before it's too late. You don't belong here. Accidents happen in quiet neighborhoods. I read them late at night, my hands cold. And for the first time, I felt something worse than anger. I felt fear. It wasn't just about rules anymore. It wasn't even about the garage. It was about driving me out. By any means, I tried to call the police again. They listened politely, but without proof, without a camera catching her in the act. There wasn't much they could do. They told me to keep a record, as if a stack of papers would keep nails out of my driveway. So I started writing everything down, every noise, every shadow, every whisper I caught at the mailbox cluster, because I knew, sooner or later, she would slip. One night, around 2 a.m., I heard it again, a soft clink outside my window. I crept to the blinds and pulled them open just a crack, and there she was, the president, standing in the dark, flashlight in hand, snapping photos of my yard. She crouched low, pointing at a small patch of grass that had grown taller than the rest, her face twisted in concentration, like she was building a case for the Supreme Court. I lifted my phone, recording through the blinds, and that's when she turned her head, her eyes locked on mine through the glass. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she smiled, not a friendly smile, a smile that said, "I see you, and I don't care." The next morning, another fine showed up. Grass height violation, $100. I almost laughed. Almost, because at that point, it wasn't even about money. It was about breaking me, slowly, piece by piece. And it was working. I stopped sleeping. Every creak of the house made me jump. I avoided walking outside unless I had to. The neighbors looked at me like I was toxic, like standing too close to me might get them fined too. I felt alone, surrounded by people, but completely alone. And then, it got worse. One Friday evening, I came home to find my garage door wide open. My heart nearly exploded. I ran inside. The motorcycles were still there, the boxes still stacked, but someone had been inside. I could feel it. A wrench lay on the floor where I hadn't left it. One of the sheets covering the bikes had been pulled halfway off. I checked the camera, but the feed was blank. The wires had been cut. I sat in the middle of the garage, shaking, because this wasn't just harassment anymore. This was invasion. And if she could cut wires, what else could she cut? I thought about giving up. I thought about selling the house, leaving the cul-de-sac, running from the nightmare. But then I remembered my grandfather's words. He used to say, "A man who runs from a bully will spend his whole life running." And I wasn't going to run, so I started planning, not just to defend myself, but to end this. I set up new cameras, hidden ones this time, inside the shrubs, under the eaves, even one tucked inside the mailbox. And I waited for days. Nothing happened. The silence was almost worse, like she knew I was watching, like she was waiting too. Then one night, the cameras caught it. 3 figures, moving in the dark. Not just her this time, 2 others with her. One carried a small crowbar, another carried a flashlight, and they were heading straight for my garage. I watched from inside my living room, my heart hammering against my ribs. The feed showed them prying at the side door, whispering, laughing softly, and then I saw her face. The president, focused, determined, obsessed. I dialed the police again, this time with live footage, this time with it's undeniable proof. By the time the squad car rolled up, they were still at the door, caught red-handed. The flash of red and blue lights washed over the cul-de-sac again. Neighbors rushed outside, whispering, recording on their phones. The officers pulled them back, questioned them, and finally turned to me. "Do you want to press charges?" I looked at her. For the first time, she looked nervous. Not furious, not smug. Nervous. The queen of the HOA, standing in my driveway, caught like a common thief. But here's the thing. The officers told me something that made my stomach twist. They said, "Even if we charge her, it doesn't stop the HOA from acting against you." They said, "She's still president. She still has the board." And that's when I realized I could win battles. But the war wasn't over, because this wasn't about one garage or one woman. This was about the system she controlled, the board, the bylaws, the power. If I wanted peace, I couldn't just fight her. I had to take away her throne. But how do you dethrone a queen in the suburbs? How do you beat an HOA president at her own game? The night she was caught at my garage should have ended everything. The neighbors saw it. The police saw it. The cameras recorded it all. But somehow, it didn't end. She walked away that night without handcuffs. The officers told me the charges would take time. They told me the courts would decide. They told me to be patient, but patience doesn't mean peace, because the very next morning, another violation notice was taped to my door. This one made me laugh out loud. Improper garage door paint, not within approved color range. The garage door, the same one painted 10 years before I even bought the house. Now suddenly it wasn't the right shade of beige? I knew what was happening. She was striking back. If she couldn't scare me with fines, if she couldn't break in and catch me, she would bury me in paper. But this time, I was ready. I didn't just want to fight her. I wanted to take her down. Not in the driveway, not in the middle of the night, but in the only place it mattered, the HOA itself. I started by reading the bylaws again. Every page, every line, every ridiculous clause written in legalese so thick it could choke a lawyer, and buried inside, I found something, a small section nobody ever talks about, the recall process. It said that if a certain number of homeowners signed a petition, the board president could be removed, not suspended, not fined, removed. The queen could be dethroned. But here's the thing. To get signatures, I had to talk to my neighbors, the same neighbors who now avoided me, the same neighbors who thought I was toxic. It felt impossible, but I didn't have a choice. So I started small. I went door to door, one house at a time. At first, the doors barely opened. People gave me polite smiles, quick excuses. Some didn't open the door at all. But then, I tried something different. Instead of defending myself, I showed them the footage. The video of the president breaking into my garage, the audio from the meetings, the photos of her unapproved fence and illegal patio one by one. The neighbors started leaning closer, one by one. They started whispering the same thing. We didn't know. And then came the stories. The man down the street fined for a garden gnome. The elderly woman charged $50 a day because her grandson's bicycle was left outside. The single mom who had to repaint her house twice because the shade of tan wasn't consistent. They had all suffered, but none of them had stood up. Until now, the signatures began to build, slowly at first, then faster. It was like a dam breaking, all the frustration, All the fear, finally spilling out within 3 weeks. I had more than enough. I filed the petition with the HOA management company, and that's when the real battle began. The president found out immediately. She stormed into my yard, waving a copy of the petition, her voice cracked with fury. "You think you can take this from me? You think you can win?" I didn't say a word. I just looked at her, because the truth was, she already knew the answer. The recall meeting was set for the following month. Every homeowner would vote, yes or no, keep her, or remove her. The weeks leading up to it felt like a campaign. She knocked on doors, spreading lies about me. She told people I was running an illegal business. She told them I wanted to destroy the community. She even said I was dangerous, but I had the footage, I had the files, I had the truth. And the truth was stronger than fear. The night of the recall meeting, the community center was packed, every seat filled. People lined up against the walls, whispers buzzing like bees. The board sat at the front, the president in the middle, her smile stretched tight across her face, but her hands trembled on the table. The meeting began. She stood first, giving a long speech about integrity and protecting property values. Her voice was strong, but her eyes darted nervously. She knew what was coming. Then it was my turn. I stood at the podium, my hands gripping the wood so tightly my knuckles turned white. And I told them everything. About the letters, about the fake orders, about the break-ins caught on camera, about the lawsuits meant to scare me into silence. I showed the videos, I showed the photos, I showed the petition. The room was silent when I finished. Silent, but heavy. Because everyone knew. This wasn't just my story, it was theirs too. The votes were cast, slips of paper folded and dropped into a box. The board counted slowly, carefully, while the room held its breath. And then, the result was announced, by a margin of 22-8. The president was removed. The room erupted. Some clapped, some gasped, some just stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. She stood slowly, her face pale, her eyes wide. For the first time, she had no words. She gathered her papers, shoved them into her bag, and walked out. Her heels clicked against the floor, echoing like the end of an era. And just like that, the queen was gone. But as I walked home that night, past the streetlights and the quiet houses, I couldn't shake a thought. People like her don't just vanish. They linger. They wait. They plot in the shadows. And I wondered, even without the title, without the gavel, without the crown, was she really finished with me? The night the votes came in, I should have felt free. The president was gone, her power stripped away, her gavel silenced. But freedom doesn't come easy in suburbia. Not when shadows linger, not when grudges burn. For weeks after her removal, the neighborhood felt different, the air lighter, the whispers quieter. Neighbors smiled again. Some even apologized for staying silent before. I nodded. I forgave. But deep down, I didn't forget, because I knew her. I knew the way her eyes burned when she lost. I knew she wasn't finished. And I was right. One evening, I came home to find another envelope on my door. No HOA logo this time. No official seal. Just my name scratched in messy handwriting. Inside was a single photo. My garage. Taken at night, the motorcycles covered, the boxes stacked. Someone had been watching. Someone still wanted in. I looked up and down the street. Nothing but quiet houses and glowing porch lights. But I felt it, that same heavy feeling I had felt before, the feeling of being hunted. I told myself it wasn't her. Maybe it was just a prank. Maybe it was kids. But the truth whispered louder. It was her. She was gone from the board, but not from the neighborhood. A few days later, I saw her, walking her dog past my house. She didn't wave, she didn't smile, she just looked. A long, steady look, like a warning. The new board tried to calm me. They said she was powerless now. They said the rules would finally be fair. They said I had nothing to worry about. But the fines kept coming, not from them, but from the city. Noise complaints, zoning complaints, anonymous tips about illegal storage, each one traced back to concerned neighbors. But I knew it was her voice behind those words. She had lost her crown, but she still had claws. I almost broke again. The stress ate at me. I woke in the middle of the night sweating, checking locks, checking cameras, checking shadows. But then, one morning, something changed. I was sipping coffee when a knock came at my door. It wasn't her. It wasn't the board. It was a man in a city inspector's jacket. He handed me a folder. Inside were photos, not of my house, but hers. Unpermitted construction, safety hazards, even tax issues. Someone had filed complaints against her. Detailed, documented, devastating. I looked at the inspector and asked who filed them. He shrugged. Anonymous tip, but thorough, very thorough. I didn't say a word, but inside, I smiled, because the queen who built her empire on rules was about to drown in them over the next month. The city came down hard, fines stacked higher than mine ever had. Her illegal patio had to be demolished, her shed had to be moved, her pool filter torn apart and replaced. I watched from my driveway as workers tore her yard apart. She stood there, arms crossed, face pale, and for the first time, she looked small, not powerful, not scary, just another homeowner buried by the same rules she once used to bury others. Neighbors whispered, some even laughed quietly, and little by little, the fear she spread vanished. By the end of summer, her house went up for sale. The sign planted in her perfect lawn like a gravestone. She didn't wave goodbye. She didn't say a word. She just packed her things, loaded her car, and drove away, gone like a storm finally passing. And just like that, the neighborhood was quiet again. But here's the thing. Quiet doesn't mean peace. Quiet means waiting. Because sometimes storms circle back. Even now, months later, I still wonder if I'll see her again, in another cul-de-sac, on another board, with another set of rules in her hand, because people like her, they don't stop, they just find a new stage. I close my garage door every night, lock it twice, check the cameras, the motorcycles still sit inside, shining under the bulb, safe, for now. But sometimes I catch myself staring at the street, at every car that slows down, at every stranger walking by, wondering, is it really over, or is she just waiting for the next move?